I want to show you something that stopped me cold. And I need you to really pay attention because once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. I was going through old building records, and I mean old. 1600s Europe, tax papers, property logs, room measurements, the kind of stuff that puts most people to sleep before page 2. I opened a file on a building listed as a grain storage house, a place to keep wheat. That's what it said on the paper. The floor was rubber, not stone, not wood, not packed dirt. A thick, layered, flexible material sitting on top of a stone base, springy, shock-absorbing. In a grain storage house, in 1683. Why does a room full of wheat need a floor that absorbs impact? I kept reading. Iron rings bolted into the walls, not one or two, dozens. At chest height, waist height, above the head, spaced every 4 feet, solid, load-bearing. Engineers who tested similar fittings found they could hold over 400 pounds of sideways force each. The file called them decorative wall pieces. 400 pounds. Decorative. Iron bars across the ceiling, thick ones, anchored deep into the stone, strong enough for several grown adults to hang from at the same time. The file called them ornamental crossbeams. I closed that file and opened the next one. Different country, same century. Same rubber floor, same iron rings, same ceiling bars, same label. Municipal grain hall. Next file, same thing. Next file, same thing. 7 files in, I stopped reading the labels. Because the labels were lying. Every single one. Different cities, different countries, different decades. Same setup, same features, same vague, boring words hiding the same impossible rooms. As if someone had gone through every archive in Europe with a marker and a dictionary and swapped out whatever these buildings were actually called with the dullest possible description. This is not a story about grain. This is not a story about civic halls or public pavilions or any of that. This is a story about gyms, real gyms, training spaces, places where people went to build their bodies 350 years before anyone was supposedly doing that. And if that sounds crazy, good. It should. Because either I'm reading this all wrong, or everything you were taught about the history of fitness is missing something huge. Stay with me. I'll show you which one it is. Quick question. What is a gym? Strip away the brand, the logo, the monthly membership. What does a gym actually need to work? I'll keep it simple. 1. A floor that handles impact. Not just foot traffic, impact. Heavy things hitting the ground over and over, hundreds of times a day, without the floor cracking or giving way. You build that kind of floor on purpose. You don't get it by accident. 2. Fixed points on the walls and ceiling. Things to grab, hang from, push against, pull against. At different heights. Low, middle, high. Because a body needs resistance from every direction to grow. 3. Air. A lot of it. Way more than a normal room needs. People training hard generate serious heat. Their lungs need volume. A room full of people working at full effort becomes unlivable in minutes without a real air system. 4. Recovery space. Hot water. Cold water. Right next to the training area. Not across town. Next door. Because going from heat to cold and back again is how the body repairs itself after hard work. 5. Weighted tools in different sizes. Light, medium, heavy, heavier. Because the only way a body gets stronger is by being asked to do slightly more than it did last time. That's it. That's all it takes. That's what a gym is. 5 things. They haven't changed. A body in 1680 works the same way a body works today. Gravity existed. Iron existed. The need to get stronger existed. None of that was invented in the 1800s. Hold those 5 things in your head. Now come with me to the 1600s. Here's what the history books say about physical fitness in the 1600s. Nothing. That's the full answer. Rich people fenced, soldiers trained, farmers did hard labor. The end. No gyms, no equipment, no planned training. Just bodies doing whatever their daily work made them do. That's the official story. Here's what the buildings say. Across Western Europe, there are dozens of large stone buildings from the 1600s and early 1700s that share something strange. Not just similar features, the same features, in the same setup, over and over again. The floors are layered. Stone base, thick top layer, flexible, built to absorb repeated impact. Not for grain sitting still on shelves, for heavy objects being dropped again and again. You build that floor because you know what's coming. The walls are lined with iron hardware at regular heights, rings, hooks, short bars, all right at the points where a human body would use them. Chest height, waist height, full reach overhead, every 4 feet apart, tested to hold forces that would rip normal wall fixtures right out of the stone. The official records call them decorative or utility hardware of unclear purpose. The ceilings carry iron bars anchored into the main beams, not for looks, tested to hold the full weight of multiple adults at once. The records call them ornamental ironwork. The air systems are massive. Channels cut straight into the walls, sized for 5 to 10 times the airflow that room would need if people were just standing around. Completely useless for a building storing grain, perfectly designed for a room full of people pushing their bodies to the limit. And then there's the water. Almost every one of these buildings has a connected section with pools. Not one temperature, multiple. Shallow, warm pools, deep, cold ones. The layout is built for moving between them fast. Heat, cold, heat, cold. That's not bathing. That's not relaxing. That's athletic recovery. That's what serious athletes do today after hard training. The same steps, the same temperatures, in buildings from 1683. Now, go back to the list. Impact floor, check. Wall-mounted resistance points at body height, check. Ceiling bars for hanging, check. High-volume airflow for hard effort, check. Hot and cold recovery pools, check. 5 for 5. Every single box. In buildings the official record insists were grain stores and public halls. Now I need to show you the art. And this is where it gets really strange. No cameras in the 1600s. Fine. But there were artists. Thousands of them. And the painters of this era were not making things up. They were trained to draw exactly what they saw. Every shadow, every fold of cloth, every line of muscle. These were people who spent years learning to put reality onto a surface. And what they put on that surface were bodies that don't add up. I'm not talking about guys who look strong. I'm not talking about thick arms from farm work. Hard labor gives you a specific look. Uneven, overdeveloped in the muscles your job uses, underdeveloped everywhere else. Rough, lopsided. That's a work body. What these painters drew is different. Even development all the way around. Full, round shoulders. Clear muscle lines down the sides of the ribs. A back wide enough at the top to make the shape of the torso into a V. Clean rows of stomach muscle. Detailed forearm veins that only appear after months of heavy grip work. That is not a labor body. That is not a lucky genes body. That is a body that was built in a gym,
on purpose, over time, with a plan. And the wildest part? The artists didn't treat it as special. They didn't frame it, didn't point at it. These bodies just appear in the paintings like furniture and trees. A man standing in a market scene with shoulder development that only comes from specific pulling movements. A figure leaning in a doorway with upper back muscles that need heavy lifting to look that way. Just there. Normal. Background detail. What did the experts say? Artistic style. The artist was influenced by old Greek sculptures. A creative choice. Doesn't reflect real people. Okay, think about that for 1 second. Making someone look better means smoother skin, better posture, a kinder expression. That's what an artist does when they're flattering someone. It does not mean drawing the exact spot where a specific muscle attaches to the bone. It does not mean showing the exact split between two heads of a muscle in the arm. It does not mean getting the pattern of a vein right in the way that only appears after months of specific training. That's not style. That's observation. The artist drew what was in front of them. But the same people who will write 30 pages about what a bowl of fruit means in an old painting won't spend 10 seconds asking why the man behind the fruit bowl has a back that needs a pull-up bar to build. Funny how that works. Here's where I need you to really sit up. Because everything I just showed you about Europe, it's not just Europe. North America, East Coast, stone buildings from the early 1700s in colonial cities that barely had paved streets yet. Same reinforced floors, same iron fittings on the walls at body height, same ceiling bars, same oversized air channels, same hot-cold water rooms right next door.
Cities that were still new and rough around the edges, already built with what I can only describe as gym infrastructure. And here's the part that stopped me cold. Some of those same buildings were turned into YMCA gyms in the 1880s. They just changed the sign out front, barely touched anything inside, because the building was already perfect for it. Then some of those same buildings became regular commercial gyms in the mid-1900s. New sign, same bones. Then some of those became CrossFit spaces in the 2000s. New sign again, same iron on the walls that was there in 1720. 3 different fitness movements, 3 different eras, 1 building, every single time. And we're supposed to believe that's a coincidence? South America, Spanish colonial areas. Same features, same iron, same floors, same pools. And the Spanish kept some of the most detailed records of any colonial power in history. Every nail, every board, every item shipped across the ocean was written down somewhere. But these buildings? Houses of civic well-being. That's all they wrote. Central Asia, the old territories that European mapmakers labeled Tartaria. And I want to be clear about that word because it gets misused. It wasn't a country. It was a label that mapmakers put on large parts of Asia they didn't fully understand. It meant, here is a place we don't have complete information about. Not knowing a place doesn't mean the place was empty. And in those territories, the same buildings show up. Same iron ring layout, same wall spacing, same floor build, same air channel design. In places the official story says we're too far away, too disconnected, too basic to have anything like this. Same iron, same spacing, same everything. Hundreds of miles from the nearest city on the official timeline. Explain that. Now here's the part that turned this from interesting to something I couldn't stop thinking about. The measurements. When researchers actually went into these buildings with tape measures, in France, in Germany, in England, in Philadelphia, in Colombia, in Kazakhstan, the numbers matched. Wall fittings exactly 48 inches apart, center to center. Not roughly, not around there, exactly 48 inches. Building after building, country after country. Ceiling bars exactly 96 inches off the floor. Everywhere. Reinforced floor zones directly under the wall fittings, extending exactly 36 inches out from the wall. Lighter floor support between the fitting stations, as if whoever designed these buildings knew exactly where a person would stand, exactly how far from the wall they'd position themselves, exactly where the heaviest contact with the floor would happen. These are not rough similarities, these are specifications, exact ones. Across 4 continents, in buildings separated by thousands of miles, built during a time when, according to every history book, sending a message across an ocean took months. You don't get that by chance. Coincidences don't have measurements. Coincidences don't repeat to the exact inch across oceans. Coincidences don't show up in the same setup on 4 separate land masses. So who had the blueprint? The buildings are only half of it. Let me show you the equipment. In museums across Europe, not in the display halls, not under the spotlights, but in the back rooms, in the storage drawers that don't get opened, in the crates that haven't been fully checked in decades, there are objects. Iron spheres with handles, perfectly round, smooth, heavy. The handle comes up from the top at a specific angle, the exact angle that modern research says is best for a particular type of powerful hip and back movement. The weights range from 15 to 75 pounds. The museum label says counterweight or industrial ballast or hardware of unknown use. A 72-pound iron ball with a handle shaped to fit the human grip perfectly. Unknown use. Sure. Stone cylinders with grooves cut into them for the fingers, different widths, different weights, shaped exactly like something you'd use to train your grip. The museum calls them grain measures, 2 iron half-spheres connected by a short, thick bar, one on each end, identical to a dumbbell. The museum calls them balance scale parts or building ornaments that weigh 35 pounds each, fit perfectly in a human hand, and come in matching pairs. Just decorating the place with 35-pound iron hand-shaped objects. Normal. And then there are the discs. Flat, round, stone, or heavy metal, hole in the center. They come in sets. Each set goes from light to heavy in even steps. The center holes are all the same size within each set. Several sets still have a smooth finish on the outer edges, not decorative, not protective. It's the kind of finish that makes something easier to grab, easier to slide onto a bar, and easier to slide off again. That finish has zero reason to exist on a counterweight, zero reason on building hardware, zero reason on any of the labels these have been given.
But on a weight plate?
The reason is obvious. I've tracked references to over 40 of these disc sets across 11 museum collections in Europe. Every single one is dated by the museum to the late 1600s or early 1700s. There's one set I keep coming back to. 8 stone discs. Lightest one around 5 pounds, heaviest around 45. Center hole exactly 2 inches across. Every disc found in the basement of a building in Central Europe described in the city records as, and this is a direct quote, Civic Hall of Unknown Original Function. Let me say that again. A building with iron rings on the walls, flexible layered floors, oversized air channels, an attached hot and cold water room, and a set of 8 graduated stone discs with matching center holes stacked neatly in the basement. Unknown original function. Unknown to whom? Because it is not unknown to me. It is not unknown to anyone who has ever been inside a gym. It is not unknown to anyone willing to look at what's actually there instead of what the sign says. The function is practically shouting. The label is barely whispering. So where did it go? If all of this existed, the buildings, the equipment, the training, the bodies we see in the artwork, where did it go? How does an entire global system of physical training just disappear? That's the question. And the answer might be the most uncomfortable part of this whole thing. It didn't fade out. Technologies fade out slowly. They leave a trail. You can follow the decline, find the moment something new replaced them, see the period where old and new overlapped. There are always crumbs. This didn't leave crumbs. This left a cliff edge. One moment it's there, the next it's gone. Buildings still standing, purpose wiped out. Equipment still in the basement, context deleted. Bodies still in the paintings, explanation removed. Think about what should exist if organized physical training was practiced across 4 continents for over 100 years. Training guides. Written instructions for how to progress, how to recover, what to eat. Medical records, because training produces injuries. Injuries produce doctor visits. Doctor visits produce paperwork. Supply records for the iron. Maintenance logs for the buildings. Legal records when something went wrong. The full paper trail that surrounds any regular human activity. Every human technology in history leaves that trail. Farming does. Shipbuilding does. Weaving does. Even children's games leave records somewhere. This one? Nothing. The trail wasn't thinned out. It was cut clean. The buildings stand. The iron is still there. The art survived. But every single document that would connect those things, every instruction, every log, every note that would say, this building is for training, these objects are for lifting, these people built their bodies here. Gone. All of it. Across every continent where the buildings appear. That's not neglect. Neglect is messy. Neglect leaves scraps. This is clean. This is thorough. This is the kind of empty space that takes real work to create. And then, in the 1890s, the silence breaks. A man named Eugen Sandow steps onto a stage in 1893, flexes his muscles, and the world acts like it's never seen anything like it. Physical training is announced as a new idea. Progressive resistance is presented as a fresh invention. The gym is born. But Sandow lived in cities where those buildings were still standing, still full of iron, still equipped with recovery pools, still bearing their soft, meaningless civic names. The stone discs were still in the basements. Nobody noticed? Nobody walked into one of those buildings, felt the springy floor, saw the iron rings on the walls, found the weight discs, and thought, wait a minute. Or did they notice? Did they notice and simply not say where the idea came from? What if the so-called invention of physical culture wasn't an invention at all? What if it was a recovery? People picking up tools from a system that had been quietly shut down, rebuilding something the buildings themselves still remembered, even if the books didn't. How do you call something new when you're standing in a 200-year-old building that was built for exactly that thing? You don't, unless you have a reason to pretend you don't see it. There's a pattern. 4 steps. I kept seeing it everywhere. Step 1. The building exists.
Reinforced floors, iron hardware on the walls, bars on the ceiling, serious ventilation, hot and cold water rooms. It shows up in records with a meaningless name. Nobody writes down what happens inside. Step 2. A new fitness era arrives. Late 1800s physical culture. Early 1900s YMCAs. Mid-1900s commercial gyms. 2000s boutique studios and functional training. Each time, someone finds one of these old buildings and thinks, this would be perfect. New sign, new coat of paint, same bones.
Step 3. Someone writes a history. Originally a military drill hall, converted to a gym in 1892. The iron rings were for military gear. The flexible floors were for marching troops. Clean story? Wrong story. But clean enough. Step 4. The original records, the early surveys, the first files, the documents that might have told a different story, disappear. Lost in a fire, destroyed in a flood, misplaced during a move. The clean story becomes the only story. The file closes. Nobody reopens it. Europe, North America, South America, Central Asia. Same 4 steps, same order, same result. The mystery quietly becomes ordinary. The questions stop getting asked. The iron rings become invisible. I'm not saying someone planned all of this. I'm saying something that might actually be harder to argue with. Nobody had to plan it. This is just what large systems do with things that don't fit. They give the odd thing a normal-sounding name. They wait 1 generation, and the odd thing becomes normal. Not because anyone decided it was, because nobody kept deciding to ask why it wasn't. That's not a plot. That's a habit. And habits are harder to push back against than plots, because there's no single person to point at. There's just a system that finds it easier to smooth things over than to sit with an uncomfortable question. The comfortable answer always wins. Not because it's right, because it requires less effort. So who built it? Who created the blueprint that appears on 4 continents with measurements down to the inch? Who forged the iron objects sitting in museum basements labeled as counterweights? Who trained the people whose bodies the artists of the 1600s drew with such accuracy? I could give you a name. I could point to a place on a map. I could tell you a story about a lost civilization, a hidden group, a power that was wiped from the records. But I'm not going to do that. The moment I give you a name, you stop thinking. You either accept the name or you reject it. You either take the theory or you walk away. And then the conversation ends. The questions stop. I don't want the questions to stop. The questions are the whole point. So here's what I'll give you instead. The things I can actually stand on. The buildings are real. You can go to some of them right now. A few of them are active gyms today. The iron fittings on the walls are 300 years older than the dumbbells on the rack inside. Nobody notices. Nobody asks. The objects are real. Iron balls with handles shaped to fit the human grip. Stone cylinders cut to train the fingers. Graduated disc sets with matching center holes. Sitting in museum storage, labeled as things they obviously are not. Gathering dust. The artwork is real. Bodies that cannot exist without planned, progressive resistance training, painted with a level of detail that goes far beyond making someone look good.
hanging in plain view in public museums. The pattern is real. Same buildings, same features, same vague records, same reuse, same closing of the file. 4 continents, 3 centuries. Something built all of this. Something used all of this. And something, and this is the word I keep landing on, something was lost. Not misplaced, not slowly forgotten the way small things are. The other kind of lost. The kind where the physical evidence stays behind. Iron, stone, walls, paintings. But every word, every document, every scrap of explanation gets stripped away, replaced with unknown, replaced with decorative, replaced with a label boring enough that no one ever thinks to look deeper. The kind of loss that, from 300 years away, looks a lot like it was done on purpose. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm showing you what's there. I'm asking the questions I found impossible to stop asking once I started. Questions that every old survey, every museum visit, every aged engraving made louder instead of quieter. I started this with a rubber floor in a grain storage house on a regular Thursday morning. One small detail that was wrong. I'm ending it with one question. What was happening inside those buildings? Not the official answer, not grain storage, not civic assembly, not unknown function. The real answer. The one the iron rings know. The one the floors remember. The one the stone discs in the basement have been holding for 300 years. What were those fittings anchoring? What were those floors absorbing? What was moving through those ventilation channels? What were those bodies doing in those hot and cold pools? What did the people who built those buildings, who paid for the iron, who mixed the floor material, who dug the pool basins, who bolted every single ring into every wall at exactly 48 inches apart, what did they know that we've been told nobody knew yet?
Once you see the pattern, it doesn't leave. Iron on the walls, padding on the floors, bars on the ceilings, heat and cold in the pools, stone discs in the basement with smooth edges and perfect holes. The same setup on 4 continents, measured to the inch, written up in the vaguest possible language, reused every few decades for whatever fitness trend comes along next. As if every trend is just trying to get back to what the building was made for in the first place. Paintings full of bodies that break the timeline. Bodies drawn by artists who painted everything else from real life. And these bodies too. But we're told to call it a style choice and keep walking. Museums full of objects with labels that are obviously wrong, and nobody corrects them. Records full of the word unknown, repeated so many times, in so many places, across so many years, that the repetition itself starts to feel like something. A shared agreement to not know. A quiet group decision to look the other way. Unknown origin, unknown function, unknown date. How many times can you write unknown before it stops being a gap in the record and starts being a choice? How many buildings can you label unknown function before the label itself becomes the whole point, to keep people from looking? The deeper you go, the less the official story holds. Not in one place. Everywhere, all at once. 4 continents, 300 years, buildings that shouldn't exist, equipment that shouldn't be there, bodies that shouldn't look like that, records that shouldn't be this empty. What do we actually know about what was happening inside those halls in 1650, in 1680, in 1720? And what have we all quietly agreed, without discussion, without a vote, not to ask? The buildings are still there. They've been there this whole time. The iron is still on the walls. The discs are still in the basement. The art is still in the museums, waiting for someone to read what's actually there, instead of reading the sign on the door. This video presents historical observation and open-ended questions for discussion. Viewers are encouraged to research further and draw their own conclusions.